Okay, welcome to Planet Geography. Today we are tackling deltas and how they form in the mouths of rivers and estuaries. So let's just go through what's in front of us first. So here we have our river, coastline, sea. So this should be quite quick to explain. What we see is that in our river, as we know, there is transportation of sediment taking place. So what I'll do is I'll flash up an image of a real river entering the sea, and you can literally see from the aerial image the amount of sediment being carried. This is when the load is at its greatest. So we can see the sediment being transported. Well, what happens when it reaches sea level, when it reaches our oceans? Our rivers are traveling at their fastest speed at this point. But when they reach sea level, they lose their kinetic energy because they have no more gravitational potential energy to convert. And as we know, when water loses energy, it loses the energy to transport, and deposition takes place. Okay? So I'm going to quickly draw you a cross-section of what is happening. So what is happening is that this is sea level, and this is the ocean floor. As that sediment goes from being transported to being deposited, we can see that layers of sediment are added and builds up over time to eventually, as you can see, it's going to go above sea level. Okay, when it goes above sea level, that's how a delta forms, that's how an island forms. Okay, so that's what starts to happen all along our coastlines. So these small islands start to appear, deltas. And this can take hundreds of years as the sediment is deposited and deposited. But what happens then next is, well, how does it go from being a pretty insignificant island to becoming an actual fully formed piece of land? Well, just like sand dunes, we start to see a bit of plant succession. So we might have some marron grass start to form, okay? Vegetation starts to appear. Now, when there's vegetation, you should know from the nutrient cycle, that when that vegetation dies, it creates soil. That soil builds up over time, and eventually you might start to see some more established vegetation taking place, trees, and eventually that becomes more established land. Okay, that's essentially what a delta is. It's how estuaries form. It's how rivers create new land. Erosion in the upper course, transportation in the middle course, and here in the lower course of the river, we see deposition. Okay, so these are how the world's great deltas are formed. We have the Nile's delta, we have the Ganges delta, and we have the Mekong delta in Vietnam. I'll flash up some images of those too, but it's quite a straightforward process. If you just remember, the rivers are transporting sediment, but once they reach sea level, they stop flowing and they deposit sediment. That sediment builds up over time to form islands. Those islands are then populated with vegetation that becomes more advanced and larger over time and thickens the soil. And then the whole cycle repeats itself, okay? Hope you found that useful. We'll now jump into an exam question, as always. And like and subscribe if you found it useful, as I'll be putting out more content as we hit the exam period. So, as far as I can tell, deltas haven't come up in any exam questions yet for these courses of Edexcel or AQA, but they are on a specification, so they can appear, so we need to be ready for them. So, this is a question that I've come up with that I think represents what it probably would look like in an exam. Explain the formation of one landform found in the lower course of a river. So it doesn't actually say anything about deltas, but we bug before we do anything else. Box the command word, so it's explain, formation, underline, landform, lower course, river. And then we glance at the marks to see that structure that we're going to need. So let's look at kind of a imagined mark scheme. Deposition is going to get your mark, role of transportation, vegetation stabilizing the delta will get a mark. And if you have an example, absolutely try and get it in there. So 4 marks is still points-based marking. So this would be my structure. Here is your point, and here is the 3 developments that will get you the remaining 3 marks. As always, try to fill in the blank, one blank is, with a word from the question. So I would say one landform is deltas. And everything that comes afterwards must link to deltas. Okay? So you're writing a short paragraph here. So let's see what that might look like. So one formation is a delta. Here, this is our point. Everything else must flow from this. Because a river slows down at its mouth, leading to deposition of sediment such as silt and sand. You're kind of getting that second mark for deposition and sediment. Silt and sand is a nice little extra. As a result, an island begins to emerge. Complex sentence, followed by the presence of vegetation preventing erosion and allowing the delta to expand. So this second mark is going to really come from the idea of the island emerging and the vegetation allowing it to grow larger and larger. So how do I get that last mark? Well, I use that connective for example. For example, the Nile Delta in Egypt was formed due to sediment deposition at the mouth of the River Nile. Interestingly, if you don't have an example, you could just put this means that. Over time, the land becomes more established and trees begin to emerge. That would also pick you up the mark, okay? So this isn't a science. As long as you have that point developed a further 3 times, you're going to pick up your full marks. Again, that gets 100% for me, and I hope it kind of visualizes what you need to be aiming at. Like and subscribe for future videos. I'll be putting out more and more as we get towards exam season. Okay, take care.